Welcome back to PedalBox, where we are in the mad dash to get this car ready to go to Rustival next week. So you might have already seen us at Rustival or seen the video that we did from there or the coverage, and you will know whether or not we made it and succeeded before you actually watch this episode. But we're hopeful right now that we're going to get all of this back together and ready, get the car MOT'd, make it up there. Here's the culmination of weeks worth of work, from getting our motor sorted, taking the mechanism apart, getting all of those parts cleaned after we got our plastic tray sorted, so we knew whether or not we were going to have to buy a new one or whether or not this was salvageable. And I think I've salvaged it good enough. So we need to put all of these pieces back together. There are these little brackets that go on the front to give the leading edge a little bit more strength, and then we obviously have to reassemble this mechanism, which I've done all of the painting on to make sure that these brackets have the best possible chance of not corroding. And of course the last piece that we added in the last episode on this are new braces to actually go across and attach the tray onto the mechanism itself. So let's get some of this stuff back together. Let's get the car on the driveway, pull the bumper off yet again, and start throwing all of this back together in time for Rustival next week. So let's start with something that should be nice and easy. We've just got to pop rivet all of these reinforcement struts back into the Undertray. Now these get pop riveted from the underside, so the flat dome head of the rivet is what will sit against the inside edge of the bumper. Otherwise, if it flapped around, this big nubbin that's going to be on the other side is going to slap its way into the underside of the bumper, or the inside of the bumper realistically, and that's going to cause damage. Now this is obviously still a little bit too long, but these were the shortest pop rivets that I could possibly find. So I'm going to have to trim these down a little bit just to get some of this extra tube off that we do not need, because these go up to something like 2.5 mil, and I think with this steel and the plastic we're probably not much more than about 1 millimeter. But basically we just go round all of these one after another, pop rivet them all in, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next stage. And that's 3 out of 4 on this one, and that should be the last one. And now that's nicely well attached. 3 more to go. And of course, always be aware of where you're actually attaching things. This should have been one set across so that this one can go in here. Now I have to start over. So not 3 more to go, 4 more to go after I've undone what I just attached. Brilliant. Next up, we're going to put the cam mechanism back together, and there is one problem I alluded to earlier that I haven't managed to solve, and that is these little nylon bushes. They've lost up to about half of their washer face, which is a bit of a problem. But I've spent some time kind of flitting with them and playing with the mechanism when I took it apart to see how much of a problem that's going to be. And I think I'm going to be able to get away with it, because these parts, as far as I can tell, at least available in the UK, are completely depreciated by Mitsubishi. So you cannot buy them, and there doesn't seem to be anybody on the aftermarket doing them either. So before these go back together, I'm going to take some measurements, and I'm going to get some nylon, some PA, plastic reels that I can run through my printer and try and print some new ones. And I think that's going to take a while to get them about right and get them fitted up nicely. But I'm going to have to take some of this apart again when I remove the splitter in order to redo the sticker on the front, because I have found where you can order them from, but I haven't ordered one yet. It will say Active Aero, so it will actually look right. And I also want to try and clean up the splitter a little bit more, but only if I can get everything else working. We'll see how that goes. So in the meantime, we're just going to put this all back together using the parts that we have. As I say, if it weren't for the fact that the actual inner material that locates it perfectly within the hole still being there, I wouldn't be using them, and I would have to try and bodge something, but I think we're going to get away with it. So all I need to do now, pull all of this tape off all of the threads and the bearing surfaces themselves when I painted them, refer back to all of my pictures of how this thing came apart, and we can get this thing back together and operating again. We'll probably try and test it off the benchtop power supply as well in the meantime, just to make sure that that motor still does spin after all this time sat on a shelf. I'd be quite disappointed if it weren't the case. but we'll see how we get on. Well, that's everything back together. It took a lot more goes than I'd hoped, and I've just realised that I'm going to have to take one more bite at the cherry of putting this motor in, because I've managed to install it 180 degrees out. You'd think that would be pretty difficult considering it's a 3-bolt pattern, but no, the motor is meant to live in this side, and the output is meant to go through this brace on the side here. So that's some top work on my part. With reassembling the mechanism itself, I managed to put one of the flanged washers, sorry, for this end into this sandwich here, which was fairly stupid. Should have been very easy to avoid, but alas, that was not the case. So now we'll just get the motor put back in the right way round, and then we can throw this back underneath the car after we've pulled the bumper off, hopefully in a bit of shade, because considering this is one of the very last days of August, it is actually very pleasantly warm. But along with the warmth comes blinding sun. Fixed. So the bumper's off, we just need to put the mechanism in place, and first up is going to be the motor, which fortunately it seems I have left all of the bolts needed to mount it in place. Of course they're not 10s, they're 12s, so that makes life an awful lot easier, and there are 4 which hold this onto the chassis, and then the bracket bolts onto, the bracket at that end bolts onto the bracket that holds it in place. So I'm going to have to undo at least one of these again, I think. Now, which way around does this go? I've already forgotten. Whoops, that way. There we go. Ooh, that's chewy. I'm going to want to tap through them before I put them in, because otherwise they are going to be absolutely horrendous. In fact, a bunch of these bolts could really use a quick cleanup. I'll be back in a minute. Great, that's the motor back together. Next up we need to attach the mechanism. Now the mechanism goes into, well, this end goes around here, so I have to take this bolt back out again, which is fine. And then there are 2 bolts on that end for the same. I'm not going to connect it up onto the motor just now. Well, I'm going to place it on, but I'm not going to actually position it, because I want to make sure that they're both absolutely vertical so they're moving in time. But first up, I need to get the bolts off this end and clean them up as well, because I wager these are probably just as crusty as the other ones, and I'll run a tap through same as I did before. Right, so next up I have to take this bolt back out again, because the bracket at this end sits in like that. That does mean I can put that one straight back in, down there, and then pop this one in. I think where some of my paint overspray went in, this is now slipped too far along, because we're about 3/4 of an inch, sort of 20 mil or so, too far that way where I put this in. Let's see if I can take a bit of potential tension off. Let's see if I can get this to wiggle a little bit more. And I really should have greased this up before I installed it all the way in, and I should have cleaned that paint off. Right, I'm gonna have to go and do that. So once again, I'll be back in a minute. So now I've got all the brackets in. There's a little bit of tightness in this camshaft where it tries to turn. It still moves, but I've had to throw quite a bit of lithium grease in underneath the pivots, and I wasn't expecting it to be quite so tight. I've taken the stack of washers and the nut off the end of the camshaft. If you imagine, that's where the hanging bar comes down and you have a camshaft that side and that side. You want them to be absolutely in line. If they're off like this, it's going to cause a problem. So I'm trying to make sure that they are dead in line with one another. So I've just had to loosen it all off again. So we just twist this back around, and in doing so, what I can see is that the camshaft where it's mounted here is slightly below the point where the motor is in line. So I think this whole bracket must have taken a bit of a knock. So I'm going to get some big grips, pop it on here, try not to ruin my paint, and just bend it down so that they line up a little bit better, because even though they bolt into the same bracket at this end, they're clearly not lining up as perfectly as they really should do. And once we've got this end aligned, we can do the other side so that when they are both vertical in the vertical position, they're in perfect time. So I'm just going to get those grips, bend this around, and try and time it all up. That seems a lot happier. So with that done, I'm going to nip the drive side from the motor down onto the spindle. This has just got a little serrated cone on the output from the motor, and that's all it does. Exactly the same way a windscreen wiper kind of mounts in. So I'll just get this tightened up. These two seem to be almost perfectly in line. And there's a little bit of movement and adjustment in the bushing where it can move around too. Of course that doesn't want to turn because it's going through a worm gear into a motor, and I don't want to strip that, so that's going to be a little bit more tricky. I should have left that off. Bugger. Okay, eyeballing it is. It's time to install the replacement parts for these two pieces, which we made last episode. This one goes on the inside, but it sits among these three bolts here, and this one fits into the recess. Now, the flat side is in line with the bottom of the undertray, so it's nice and aerodynamic, other than it's very, very bent out of shape, but I am not going to do that this time myself. The replacement I have is going to sit in this way round, which is not going to be as good for the Aero, I accept, but I think it's going to be better for the longevity of the part. The problem with this one, as I mentioned in the last episode, is this is a huge water and salt trap, which is why this end is just rusted away, and then as soon as it started to fatigue where the mechanism was going on it, it just broke away and failed. So I've made this one the other way round. The bulk of metal sits up against the undertray, and there is no water trap for it to sit in. Now, my temptation is to try and print something, which might mean modifying this again, which actually smooths over this whole piece. Will be more aerodynamic than having these holes in, albeit just fractionally, but that is the plan. I'm going for longevity rather than aerodynamic perfection. So there's the inside piece. I'm just going to bolt these together, and we can start installing this into the car. So now with those installed, we can flip this over, put it underneath the car, and put the other 4 bolts through that mount onto the actual mechanism that drops this tray down. Just before we install the undertray, it's worth taking a look at the last remaining piece of the mechanism that actually has any mobility to it. This goes inside the very front lip of the bumper, and this space between these two pieces of metal is what the undertray actually moves in between. So in order to get this in, you have to kind of finagle it around and over the top, which I think is going to be a nightmare once this is installed into the bumper, because there's 4 bolts across the bottom, sorry, 5 bolts which locate into the bottom of the bumper under here. Actually, no, that'll be okay. We'll be able to screw them from the underside, so that works. And then there's 7 bolts that go the top edge that go in through the top. So that should be okay as well. But basically this space is how the active aero moves up and down, this gap between the two pieces of metal. So you can see these strengthening ribs need to go in the front edge. There's some more metal bracing that goes around inside the bumper as well and attaches at the back corner. So the back end is fixed and it's just this front section that moves up and down. Hopefully all the plastic fixes we did are going to have enough movement and flex in them to allow that to work properly. But basically, that's all we need to do. The downside is we can't install this onto the bumper, clip it in, and then get into these bolts. With that mounted up, we can put this awkward piece of metal back in place, which is really difficult to get it to fit over because obviously everything's curved. Everything's got bits of metal attached to it as well. So it's really just unhappy about doing anything. And of course, in trying to be careful, I'm just scratching off a load of the paint I very, very carefully put on. Oh, I missed one. There we go. Conveniently, I found a couple of these little plastic screws that we can reuse. Well, we can reuse them here. At some point, I'll have to get some more of these. So they go through these holes in this scoop underneath. And as I say, they go into one of those 7, well, in this case, 2 of those 7 holes that run down across the front edge of here, which will at least hold it in place secure enough for now until I can get some more of them. Cool, so we'll get some more of those ordered so we can fill out the rest of these holes, but those 2 will hold it nicely. I actually robbed them from the intakes on the side and replaced them with some massive M8 bolts, which is vastly overkill, but these are really annoying to get out. So at least we'll have the same fastening all in one place, and I can't get any bolts into here, so these are absolutely the right fittings to use, whereas on the sides, those bolts will be dead easy to get to, should be zinc plated as well, so they shouldn't rust, which would be really, really nice as long as they don't. Last 2 bits to attach onto the bumper are these little guards. They go around the edges here, just reinforce the bumper where this is going to be tapping into and hitting, and then the whole bumper can go back on and we're basically done. Well, that was utterly miserable. I've got the last of the bolts out that hold the back of the Undertray on, but it is just starting to rain, so I'm going to have to get the camera in, get the tools in, and hit this again tomorrow to get the last few bits buttoned up. But the majority of this is done. The back is broken of the problem, but unfortunately, my back is also a little bit broken. We'll pick this up again later. We managed to get the front end all back together, just a few new bolts needed here and there, but that is complete and ready to go to the MOT. The fact that I am sat with the car in the air and the wheel off suggests to you that maybe that didn't happen. And if you saw the video from Rustival last week, you know that absolutely didn't happen. I was quite literally leaving the driveway, having just turned the car round to check all the tyre pressures, and I heard a hissing noise when I put my foot on the brake, which was a bit weird. Still had some pressure, and then all of a sudden, nothing. It just dropped all the way to the floor. Had a look at the reservoir. Yep, it was fairly low, so put some more fluid in, went again, got a little bit of pressure, and then absolutely nothing. And I could hear this hissing, and it didn't make any sense. So went around the car, had somebody else press the brake pedal for me, and sure enough, there is a phenomenal leak on this corner. One of these brake pipes, right up underneath here, behind the chassis, has an enormous leak, but realistically it's a very small hole that is just foaming brake fluid out like it's coming out of a can of brake clean. So that absolutely put pay to getting an MOT done, and now I need to look at just how bad the problem is, because I know these hard lines potentially run all the way down the length of the car. There's 4 of them that run all the way to the back, or at least there are 4 lines up where I could identify where that leak was coming from. I'm not sure which one it is, I'm not sure exactly which pipe goes to where, So I don't know what I need to replace. That's what I'm going to investigate now. And I am really, really hopeful that it's not going all the way to the front of the car, because that is going to be almost impossible to source off the shelf. I did have a quick look and I couldn't find anything easily. And to replace it, I have no idea where it actually runs through and whether or not you can bend it in, or whether you have to bend it in situ or can just throw a whole thing in without dismantling all kinds of things off the bottom of the car. So it's not looking good for me getting any fun out of the GTO before the end of this year. So I'm going to use my phone to try and track down where this is coming from a little bit better. I know it's inside the chassis rail, it's dribbling down and coming down here. You can see we've just tried to redo it again, and these, which I'm just recording on my phone now, really look pretty terrible. I am less and less confident about these brake lines generally, and I'm really unsurprised that one of these has popped. Chris, can you just slowly push the brake pedal down? Yep. And we'll see where it's coming out. Push it down fast. Oh, yeah, there we go. Right, so fantastically, it is in a section where there are 4, possibly 5 lines there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 different hard lines all running through this same space here. And it's on a corner, and it's right behind a fixing bracket that attaches it onto the chassis. So this is going to be an absolute nightmare to try and sort out. So we're underneath the car now, and you can see I've removed a little retainer bracket here from these 5 lines that run the full length of the car. They go down, it's a little bit crusty under here, but we can fix all of that. And they go into that conduit and then run right the way up into the engine bay. So this is not looking good. But if you come back this way, 3 of these lines, 1, 2 and 3, go up over the rear diff, and they seem to go in towards the fuel tank down there. Not sure why there's 3. I feed, return and something, but I'm not sure, so we'll ignore them. And then you have this line, which goes to the caliper on this side, and then another line which runs up through there, around, up, and I can feel it goes up and cuts across to the other side. So that would make sense. Run both brake lines to the rear, down the length of the car, up over the beam at this side where they split, all good. But this in here is horrendously crusty, and I have major misgivings about these lines. Now, the plan had been to pass this car on to somebody else, do it all up, and I really think it is good practice now to do something proper about these brake lines, because with one having gone, being steel, what's the likelihood that another one is potentially going to go? And in all good conscience, I don't want to sell this car onto somebody now knowing that this is a potential problem, and then find out that something goes horribly, horribly wrong. So yeah, I guess we're doing some more invasive work on this. Well, we've confirmed under the car that the conduit that has all of those lines in does run right to the front, up to the firewall, and as best as we can tell, it comes all the way up through the engine bay to right down here, where the ABS unit would normally be. And that is a major problem, because I don't think there is any way I can replace those lines in situ. Maybe if the engine was out and you could see the whole route going down, then yeah, sure, I could do it. But I really don't want to take the engine out just to replace a brake line. I am hopeful that there is a union that I can't see because of Undertray and what have you, and sort of just clutter in the way of the firewall, that is stopping me seeing where there might be a union just for the midsection to the rear of the car. And the stuff that sits in the engine bay is completely separate. That would be really, really good. However, that's now going to mean a bunch of investigation, possibly even going to the dealer and saying, hey, can you explain to me what this is? Can I still, by any chance, buy parts from you? Worst case, are you willing to do the job? Or go to one of the independents that I know and say, hey, are you willing to do the job? But I do still have to get the car there, and it has no brakes at the moment. So it's a little bit of an anticlimactic episode. Yes, we managed to get the whole of the front aero back together and all built back onto the car before Rustival, as we'd planned, and then got kneecapped at the last minute by a faulty brake system. So yeah, if you'd like to see us hopefully get this car back on the road again, like, comment, subscribe, make sure you ring the little notification bell, and if you do happen to know something about these, there are a few resources on YouTube that I'm going to go and consume to find out as much as I can. But if you know whether or not there is a union down here, comment below, please. I'll send you a t-shirt if you know that and it turns out to be correct, because that's how desperate I am. You can also buy your own t-shirts if you don't know and you want one of these at shop.pedalbox.show. And if you're a patron, which you can join us at patreon.com/pedalboxshow, you'll get a discount on merch depending on the tier that you have. So, thanks very much for watching. Once again, we will see you in the next episode, which will be on this or any one of the other things that we're working on at some point in the future. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you then.